Hi and welcome to another episode of Doorways, where we have conversations about things that might resonate with you and might encourage you to make those little changes in your life. So today we're going to talk about what fuel you're running on. And most successful people I've met aren't lacking any ambition, they're just running on the wrong type of fuel. And there's something I've been noticing more and more recently, and the people that I work with, and that's that most of us actually never stop to ask the question, what is the fuel that we're running on, and how does that help us to live and to work? So we just go on with it, don't we? We call it ambition, sometimes we call it drive, and we can call it responsibility, and that might be paying the bills, looking after the family and so forth. But underneath that, there's always something deeper in the system. And for some people, that's purpose, and for some, it's joy. Me personally, these days, it's joy. I found out the hard way by getting burnt out quite a few times that following joy is so much easier. So much easier, brings you so much more happiness, so much more energy. But anyway, let's not get sidetracked. So how can I say this? A lot of high-performing people, and if they're really honest, what drives them is fear. And I don't mean that in a dramatic way. It's normally quite a quiet underlying feeling. And it's the kind of acceptable kind of fear that sounds like, I can't drop the ball. I've got responsibilities. I need to look after the family. And so that we think, well, we'll do it ourselves. If I slow down, things will start to fall apart. But that isn't ambition. That's actually overdrive, and those two things feel very, very different. So ambition is clean, it's expansive, it feels like something you're choosing, whereas overdrive feels tight, it feels urgent, it's restless, it's debilitating, and it doesn't let you settle. So it just keeps you moving, and even when you're exhausted, you still get up, you still do the same things, you still keep running on that treadmill. I always have this vision of this hamster going around on a wheel, and I have been that person. So it gets results. It does get results. You might get promoted, you might get recognition. So we start to believe that who we are is actually that person. And I remember explaining it to somebody who couldn't see this for themselves, that what I could see was that they were on this train track and they just kept going on this train track, and it was going in one direction and it was bypassing all the stops. And they'd completely forgotten that by the side of this train track was some beautiful woodland with nice grasses and things, because they just kept going and had this expectation that everybody else should do the same. And that's how we get burnt out. So we just keep running on this train track. And then after a while, we become exhausted. And strangely, we normalise it, don't we? We absolutely normalise it. And then something else happens, and then it might completely floor you. And it becomes your identity. So you just keep going, you're exhausted, you get to a Sunday, you don't want to go to work the next day, you go on holiday, you crash after you've been on holiday, you don't really enjoy it because you're too busy just resting. So we've learnt that, somebody asks you the question, why don't you just slow down? You don't do it, do you? Or could you delegate that? Or is that yours to carry? And people are not comfortable with those questions, are you? Because your mind overrides it. And then you get that glass of wine at the end of the day, and then you get that fear again on a Sunday. And then, when you stop, you crash, and you keep going around in this vicious circle. So you're spending more and more energy, and you're giving more energy out than you are actually giving it back to yourself. And then in all of that business, we can't continue that way. But in life, we call it normal. And this is the part that I'm really starting to see clearly now, and have done for myself for a while now, is that people who truly thrive don't just work hard, but but they actually allow themselves to do more of what they enjoy. And I know that can sound almost too simple. I know. It sounds really rampant. But when you follow what brings you genuine enjoyment in your work, the whole dynamic shifts, the energy changes, your thinking changes, your relationships change. And interestingly, the results tend to improve within the business. They don't drop, because you're no longer dragging yourself through things that drain you. You're working with your energy, you're not working against it. And absolutely, this does not mean go and quit your job if you don't enjoy it. But it does mean notice what does bring you joy within that job. So I talk to, one of the first things I do is when I go into a business is I interview the people who work there and the leaders first. So I do the leaders first, or the owners, and then I go around all of the teams. And it's always a safe space to talk. But the genuine question I ask them is, what brings you joy in your job? And if it's an owner of a business, it tends to be something they originally started with and they don't do anymore. And that could be as simple as loving talking to the people by the coffee point, having that chat, having a catch up with them. What are they up to? Have they got any ideas and things, just in a casual way? Whereas they get bogged down with meetings and sitting in meeting rooms or in paperwork and so forth, and they start to not thrive in business. And then that affects everybody that works around them, because they don't thrive either. So a real shift that I do with businesses is I ask those leaders those questions and find out why they're not doing them anymore. Could they redo them? What does that look like? Could they delegate more? And then I do it with all of their team. And sometimes that just means shifting some of their team around, or shifting some of their elements of work around. But it always has a dramatic effect, because that joy filters from the top down. When the leaders are happy and thriving, the people around them are happy and thriving. And I talk about this a lot, actually, but as leaders, we have a responsibility to do that, because we're affecting not just the people that work for us, we're affecting their families as well. Because if somebody goes to work and they enjoy their day, largely, we can't always have stress-free days, but, well, saying that, I'm fibbing actually, because I do. I don't have stressful days. Very rarely, very, very rarely, I might have a day where I'm frustrated. And it's never a whole day, it's only a period of time. And that frustration sometimes is with myself. But largely, even if I've had a long day, I enjoy it. I enjoy my work. I enjoy who I work with. I enjoy the leaders I work with. I enjoy the businesses. I enjoy the teams. That changes me as a person. And therefore the people I work with. So we all affect each other. And I think it's really important that you ask yourself this question: what fuel is driving you? And if it's the wrong fuel, then you have a responsibility to yourself and to your family to make quiet changes. It doesn't have to be dramatic. I'm not saying hand in your notice. I'm not saying fundamentally shift your business. What I am saying is, if you just ask those questions, what is fueling you? And are you giving yourself the right fuel? You'd be surprised at how much it can change your life. And I would encourage you to do it. So that's my question for you today. What is driving you? Or what fuel is driving you? And if it's not the right fuel, what small change could you do to put the right fuel in?